Welcome to Deny Delay Depose, Health Over Wealth.
All right, so TikTok, huh? Completely dark. Then back up, wild ride. Reminds me a bit of our internal systems when we're under stress, like a complete shutdown. But I guess, in this case, it wasn't internal. It was more of an external force.
Yeah, it's kind of like our own cognitive functions when we get overloaded, right? A complete system crash, and then, hopefully, a reboot with some fixes. But the question is, how do we actually fix it? Is it something as simple as a 90-day reprieve and then we go back to the same broken system? And what does that system, the broken nature of our thought processes, have to do with this kind of external chaos?
It is a little chaotic, isn't it? Like 1 minute it's gone and the next it's back, all because some guy says, don't let it stay dark. It's kind of like my sleep schedule after a really intense workout, completely out of whack. I can't just snap my fingers and everything is back to normal. It needs some effort to regulate.
Right. You can't just force it back into place without considering the underlying causes. It makes me think about how much our bodies and minds crave that consistency and routine, and how these sudden shifts can throw everything off. With the TikTok situation, I wonder if it's a reflection of a similar lack of intentionality on a larger scale. We're reacting instead of acting, almost as if the entire system is experiencing a physiological reaction to stress, like heightened heart rate or something.
Exactly. It's reactive rather than proactive, and that goes to the heart of the problem. The way I see it, it's like our cognitive distortions. We have these automatic thought processes that kick in when things get stressful, like this is all a disaster or there's no hope. It's like when you get a notification about a deadline and you automatically think I'm going to fail, and you spiral out. In the TikTok situation, instead of addressing the actual security concerns, we just shut it down, a reactive response based on fear and uncertainty. It's a cognitive avoidance behavior on a massive scale, and it is clearly not a solution.
Oh, the avoidance, yes. It's like when you're dreading a workout, so you skip it instead of confronting the initial discomfort, which ultimately leads to a longer-term decline in fitness. With the TikTok thing, it feels like we're avoiding the actual complicated conversations about data privacy and international relations by just flipping a switch. It's a band-aid, not a cure.
And that band-aid is so often how we treat health problems too. We treat the symptoms without addressing the root causes. We go for the quick fix, the pill, the surgery, instead of focusing on the long-term lifestyle changes that build a stronger foundation. For instance, instead of addressing the underlying stress that's causing tension headaches, we just pop a painkiller, right? With TikTok, they're just turning it off instead of finding lasting solutions for data privacy and security.
That's a perfect analogy. It's like we have these distorted health thought patterns. Instead of thinking, I need to improve my sleep hygiene, we think I'll just take a pill to sleep. The focus is on external fixes instead of internal processes. I'm thinking in terms of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. You need to address the underlying thought patterns. For example, that instant gratification cycle, the dopamine hit that makes TikTok so addicting. We're essentially seeking that external reward rather than focusing on how it negatively impacts our ability to stay focused and present. Just like we can get hooked on sugary foods or mindless scrolling instead of building real connections.
It's the same with exercise, right? So many people look for a quick fix like a fat burner or a crash diet instead of consistent exercise and proper nutrition. Just like the TikTok situation, we are looking for an external solution to an internal problem that requires time, dedication, and a fundamental shift in our behavior. We need to think more about how it impacts our body and mind. Just like with TikTok, we're thinking about the external convenience, but we need to think about the long-term consequences.
Exactly, I think the idea of addressing that inner state is key. Like with mindful eating, it's not just about what we eat, but how we eat. It's about being present with our meals, recognizing the signals of fullness and satisfaction, instead of mindlessly consuming. The same could be applied to our relationship with technology, right? Are we using it intentionally, or are we being used by it? The TikTok ban, or the reprieve, feels very reactive. What if we could approach tech with the same kind of mindfulness, with the same kind of intentionality as we approach our own internal lives?
That is so true. Yes. It's about becoming aware of our thought processes around technology. In CBT, we talk about identifying and challenging those automatic negative thoughts, reframing them into more constructive ones. With TikTok, instead of I need my daily dose, maybe it's about reframing that into how am I using this? Is it serving me? Or am I serving it? It's about shifting our internal narrative from being a victim of addiction to becoming an active participant in our choices. This could be applied to the algorithm too, right? Thinking about how our data and our attention is being used.
I completely agree. I found that the way I approach my exercise routine has a huge impact on its effectiveness. If I'm just going through the motions, thinking I have to do it, It feels like a chore and doesn't give me the same benefit. But if I focus on my body, the movement, the connection between the exercise and how my body feels, it's much more rewarding and sustainable. It's about being intentional. In the same way, with our devices, it's not just about turning them off, but about using them in a way that's mindful and intentional, not reactive.
And that intention is really where the power lies, I think. When we practice intentionality, it's like a form of self-compassion, right? We're choosing actions that are aligned with our values and our goals, and that generates a sense of control over our well-being, which is empowering. With something like the Ten Commandments in schools, it feels like a forceful imposition, a lack of intention or awareness. It's like we're being told what to believe instead of being given the tools to discern and explore ourselves. It feels reactive, like the TikTok ban.
Yes, the Ten Commandments thing. It's a perfect example of cognitive rigidity, where people get stuck in one specific perspective and are unwilling to see other points of view. It's like we're going back to outdated ways of thinking that are causing problems in the first place. Like this fear-based response, an inability to tolerate uncertainty instead of engaging in open, thoughtful dialogue. We just want a quick authoritarian solution. It is the same with this TikTok ban. We are scared of the unknown, so we ban it. The rigid thought process is at the heart of the matter.
That's it. It's a rigid approach, not really understanding the complexities. It's like telling someone, you have to do these exact exercises in this exact order to be healthy, instead of helping them understand the underlying principles of movement and allowing them to adapt to their own body. Forcing the 10 Commandments isn't really about teaching values. It's like forcing someone to eat a certain diet, but without actually teaching them about nutrition. We need to be given the tools to grow and learn.
Exactly. It's about cultivating that inner wisdom, that inner knowing, instead of imposing external rules. It feels like those in charge are trying to force an external one-size-fits-all solution, and you see how ineffective that is with things like fad diets. The real work, the real change, happens internally when we're allowed and empowered to explore and discover ourselves. The imposition of rules is a very reactive response, just like the TikTok shutdown.
And this lack of internal exploration is very tied to our cognitive processes. It is like the inability to see shades of gray. It's all or nothing thinking. We can see that reflected in society too. We are so polarized. Either you are for this or against this. We see it all the time. Either you're for TikTok or against TikTok. There's no in between. We're not engaging with the complexities. We just want simple black and white answers, and that's a cognitive distortion. We should focus on cultivating cognitive flexibility.
That lack of flexibility also leads to injury, physical injuries. If you always do the same exercises the same way, your body starts to compensate, and that's when you're more vulnerable to injuries. You need to be able to adapt and listen to your body. If we don't allow flexibility in our own thought processes, we're setting ourselves up for similar injuries and our mental well-being. The TikTok thing, the 10 Commandment thing, it's all the same rigidity and inflexibility.
It makes me think of that guided meditation I use, the one focusing on slow, deliberate breathing. It is a practice, and with each breath, you're sort of creating space, you're cultivating awareness. It's almost like allowing things to unfold naturally rather than forcing them. So often we try to force things to be a certain way, instead of trusting the process and finding that inner strength and resilience that is so empowering. And this is lacking in the current social situation.
That breathing technique, it's essentially training cognitive control, isn't it? You are intentionally directing your attention, and that helps to reduce reactivity. In CBT, we use similar techniques like mindfulness exercises to break the automatic cycle of negative thoughts. It's about creating that space between stimulus and response, just like the space you are talking about, Jesus. It's about creating the space to choose your actions instead of having a knee-jerk reaction, something both TikTok and the 10 Commandments proponents are failing to do.
And that space is so important, both mentally and physically. If you're always pushing your body to its limits without giving it time to recover, you're setting yourself up for failure and injury. When you can take a breath and be more intentional with your body, your muscles, you can achieve much more. You are allowing your body to guide the process. It feels like everything right now is go, 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 with no space, no recovery. We're seeing it with TikTok and the 10 Commandments, the reactive responses. We need some space to breathe.
Exactly. We're all connected. Just like with mindful eating, each bite, each conscious choice, it's a ripple effect, not only to our body, but our mind. And that awareness is something we can cultivate in all aspects of our lives. If we can approach something as simple as eating with awareness, we can begin to do the same with more complex issues like our relationship with technology or with beliefs. With TikTok and with religion, that awareness is lacking. It's about being guided by external forces rather than discovering the internal wisdom.
It's very much about understanding the interconnectedness of our cognitive and physical processes. We need to address the underlying drivers of stress and anxiety. That's where CBT can come in by helping people identify and change the thought patterns that trigger these responses. For example, instead of automatically feeling overwhelmed by a situation, we can learn to reframe it, to think, okay, this is challenging, but I can manage it. And that shifts our perception and our emotional response. We could apply that concept of identifying, reframing, and managing thoughts to our social issues as well.
The thing that frustrates me so much is that we are so reactive rather than proactive. It's like waiting until you're completely exhausted before you even consider sleep, or waiting until you get injured before you start stretching, or waiting until you have a major health issue to start thinking about diet. We're waiting until TikTok is already dominating youth culture before we worry about its impact. We're waiting to see what the Supreme Court says before doing anything. It's not a sustainable way to live. We're always in a state of panic.
It's like the body keeps trying to tell us what it needs, but we're so caught up in the external that we don't listen. We just keep pushing forward. It feels like we need a different approach to health, one that integrates the body, mind, and soul. Like, how can we foster a healthier relationship with technology, a more balanced and intentional way of being? And then, how can that translate into the healthcare system? I often find myself thinking about how amarin secretion is influenced by different factors. If that's so complex, what else is going on in our bodies that we are not even aware of? I think awareness of our bodies and our minds should be paramount.
Yes, that's a great point about the body's subtle signals and how they are impacted by our thought patterns. And that also gets to the core of why a CBT approach can be so effective for many issues. Because it is helping you understand the intricate feedback loop between your mind and your body. For instance, learning that protein trafficking can be influenced by something as simple as C-terminal tagging is fascinating. It means that even seemingly small shifts in our internal state through techniques like meditation or mindfulness could potentially impact complex cellular processes. This brings the power back to each of us, the power to impact our health. The same principles of influence should be explored in public policy.
Exactly. It shows how important it is to treat the body as an integrated system. My body seems to respond much better when I incorporate a variety of movements rather than focusing on one specific thing. And that could be said about sleep too. If I go to bed at the same time each day and have the same routine and avoid screens before bed, my body knows what to expect and I sleep better. I think it's like how the body needs a balanced diet, not just one type of nutrient. In the same way, we need a balanced approach to life. That includes the body, mind, and spirit, not a rigid system of do's and don'ts.
It's all about interconnectedness and balance, isn't it? It's not just about ticking off boxes of a healthy lifestyle, but about understanding the delicate interplay of all these systems, the body, mind, emotions, and spirit. That understanding of how subtle shifts in our internal environment can have an impact on these underlying cellular processes is so empowering. It's like our consciousness is a subtle signal that can influence these complex systems. And that's such a powerful concept, right? And the same could be said about the society we create.
Yes, and if we look at it from a CBT perspective, it's the idea of self-efficacy. When we start to understand the direct impact that our cognitive processes have on our physical well-being, it creates a sense of empowerment and control. It's no longer about being a victim of circumstance. Just like learning that amarin trafficking can be influenced by specific signals or the way your internal dialogue impacts your stress hormones, it all reinforces that sense of individual agency. And this also applies to our political and social systems. It is about recognizing the power of small, consistent changes and the long-term impact of that awareness.
That's exactly it. It's that feeling that you have agency over your body, and that makes all the difference. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's very individualized and requires exploration. And it's not about imposing some external ideal. It's about creating an environment where the body can thrive. A healthy system is responsive and adaptable and flexible. And that feels so disconnected from what we are experiencing right now in our country. So I think this concept is something that we could use. What about the 10 Commandments thing in schools? That's not a responsive approach.
Exactly. And the thing is, if we're aiming for a truly healthy society, we need to foster that sense of individual agency, that inner wisdom, that ability to discern what's right for us. And we need to cultivate that from an early age. And that means creating a system, a society that supports and empowers that exploration. The forced imposition of rules is the opposite of that. With the TikTok situation, we need to have the same approach. It's about understanding the problem and empowering ourselves, not shutting everything down. All of this is interconnected.
And the way we approach health from a cognitive perspective,
The same concepts apply to our external systems too. If we cultivate cognitive flexibility and reduce those rigid thought patterns, we can create healthier, more functional systems. And if we take the concepts of CBT and start applying them to social and political issues, it could lead to huge changes in our public discourse. For example, instead of seeing politics as black and white, good versus evil, we should think about policies and solutions from multiple perspectives. We need to stop reacting and start thinking about the root causes.
We need to stop treating everything like it's a symptom and start thinking about the underlying conditions. The reactive responses to TikTok, the imposition of the 10 Commandments, they're all symptoms of a larger issue of not being able to take a breath, to really process and understand. I think everything is about movement. It's not enough just to eat healthy, you need to move. It is not enough just to sleep, you need to move. And in the same way, we need to keep moving forward in our society. Change is hard, but necessary, and we should focus on building momentum, not stagnating.
It's about creating systems that support this inherent connection between body, mind, and soul. It's about recognizing the ripple effect that even the smallest choices can have, and about approaching life with that sense of mindful intention, knowing that we have agency in the overall health of our internal and external systems. If we focus on this, I think we will achieve a healthier society. A healthy system is one that supports all the pieces and sees the subtle connections between everything.
And from a cognitive perspective, it is about promoting systems thinking. That means that instead of focusing on individual events or symptoms, we should look at the underlying connections between these events. When we can connect the dots between our own personal health and how it relates to society, then we can begin to create systems that reflect that understanding. It is about moving past the binary and realizing that we are part of a larger system that requires our focus and intention.
It's about balance. Just like with exercise and sleep, we need the push and the rest. And that applies to everything, I think. It's about building the systems, the habits that support our body and mind. A healthy system should be one that promotes all aspects of well-being. It is about looking at the bigger picture and understanding the impact of our actions on our society and on ourselves.
Thank you for joining us today on Deny Delay Depose. Join us next week for more.